what do you mean there are no jobs? And then an extra 6 months or an extra year. Hi everyone, happy Friday. So I'm sitting here to discuss something that's actually been on my heart for a really long time. But before I dive into all the details, if you are new to this channel, hello, my name is Kuzi. I'm a Zimbabwean babe living and working here in Ontario, Canada, and welcome back to my channel. So the vibe of today's video is a little bit different. I've been giving you guys like vlogs and vlogs and vlogs, and I wanted to do something a little bit different this time. So we're having a sit down chit chat. I want to talk to you guys about my immigration journey here in Canada. So most people do not know I have been in Canada for a total of 8 years right now, guys. 8 years! That's crazy. Like, I went to school here. Obviously, I've experienced the student part of it, and now I'm working. So, I can tell you a few things. I've got some things to share about what I've experienced about the immigration system. And just in case someone out there is aspiring to come to Canada, whether it's as a student or something else, there's always something that someone can share that can help you better prepare for the journey ahead. The first thing, your passport. Your passport, by the way, once you leave your home country and are officially like an immigrant or an international student in another country, is the most important document that you own. Why am I saying this? Here is my story. In 2017, I come to Canada as an international student with the intention of studying a 4-year degree program. However, when I left my home country of Zimbabwe, my passport was actually expiring 2 years into my study program. What I didn't realize at the time is that when you enter Canada to study as an international student, there are 2 documents they need to give you. They need to give you a study permit, which permits you to study in the country, and a visa. So a visa permits you to enter the country legally. And what predicates when those 2 things expire just also so happens to be your passport. A disclaimer before I go any further, your primary source of information for all things related to Canadian immigration will forever and always and most importantly be the Canadian government. I am just sharing my opinion. I'm just sharing my journey about some of the things that I picked up, some of the things that I learned along the way. Immigration laws are constantly changing all the time. Things are looking very different right now from when I first entered Canada in 2017. So do not use this video as your primary source of information. These are simply tips that I'm sharing with you to help with anything that I've learned along the way that could assist you as well. Now back to the story. So the reason why I'm mentioning my passport is at the time, Zimbabwe was going through a very difficult time from an economic standpoint. To be frank, Zimbabwe has been experiencing an economic instability since 2008, guys. So at this point, almost 20 years of just going with the flow. People every day just trying to figure it out. So what happens when you're trying to enter Canada as an international student is you have to show what they call proof of funds. So proof of funds, if you're coming in as a student, is basically a year's worth of money that covers your tuition, your board or living expenses, your food, and any other expenses that you might have. So the government, before they allow you into the country, want to ensure that you're in a position to pay for everything that you're coming to do. That was just the standard. What happens is during the processing of your visa application and your study permit, they want to ensure that you still have that money. So what that usually means is no matter how much it is, it depends on the university that you're going to, it depends on the province that you're in. They want that money untouched, sitting in the bank for the duration of the processing of the visa. So that could take anywhere between 3 months or even longer. When you are in a country that is experiencing just a tumultuous and volatile economic situation like Zimbabwe, you can imagine that getting a hold of tens of thousands of dollars and just putting it in an account is no easy feat. It's very difficult because more than likely you need to access funds, you need to use your bank account, all the things. But just to ensure that the application goes through smoothly, they advise that they don't want to see too much movement in this bank account that you're going to be using as your proof of funds. What happened is My university had accepted me for a 4-year degree program. But when I was issued my visa and my study permit, I was only given up until the expiry of my passport, because your passport is literally the most important immigration document that you actually own. So basically, when they're making a decision, they're not looking at your acceptance offer. They're looking at your passport, because legally and officially, when your passport expires and you're in a different country than your own country, you automatically lose whatever status you have in that country. So I come in 2017 with a passport expiring at the end of 2018, and guess what that means? Automatically, my study permit and my study visa were expiring on that exact date as well. I had to, halfway through my program, go back home, reapply for a new passport, which means I had to extend or reapply for a new study permit and a new study visa. So you can just imagine what is going on mentally at this point. From a provider perspective or from a parent's perspective, you are now in the position of having to produce another bank account that has tens of thousands of dollars sitting there ready to prove again that whoever this student is, whoever your child is, whoever you're taking care of or providing for, that they can afford to continue their education. If it's even possible, I know it's not always possible in everybody's situation, extend or apply for a new passport before you apply to come into the country, before you apply for a study visa. Ideally, you want to get a passport that covers the duration of your study, whatever program it is, and then some, and then an extra 6 months or an extra year, because you never know what's going to happen after you also finish that study program. You don't want to be in a situation where your status expires in that country immediately and you're now in a scramble of trying to figure out the hows, the whos, and the whens. It can be a very stressful situation. Number 2, have a good sense of what you are coming here to study. When I started my journey in 2017, I had full intentions to come in and study a 4-year degree program. About 3 years into my degree program, just a little backstory, I was studying in Newfoundland and Labrador at the time, which is a province on the far eastern part of Canada. When I got into my 3rd year, I started to realize that the job opportunity or the prospects was not looking as great as I thought. I went to a few education seminars where different companies come to your university and they talk to students, they give out flyers, all the things. And I realized that there were a lot of companies that had opportunities for finance, opportunities for business, opportunities for oil and gas engineering in general, opportunities for everything but the program that I was studying. And I was really confused because when I left Zimbabwe to come to Canada, I never would have imagined that job prospects would be an issue for me. I went into an instant state of panic because I was 3 years deep into this program, just about to go into my 4th year. What do you mean there are no jobs? I was so stressed out. I proceeded to talk to my parents about what was going on, how I was feeling, what I was experiencing, and made a decision that I would try and, I guess, set myself apart from the rest of my peers by pursuing an honors program. And guess what that honors program would do for my degree? It would lengthen my degree program by another whole entire year. At this point, I had renewed all my documents for a second time and had been extended to roughly the end of where my degree would have been. And if I'm not mistaken, that is about 2020. That's when I was expected to graduate. 3rd year, going into my 4th year, I realized, oh shoot, I want to do honors because I'm panicking about the prospects and what it looks like after I finish school. And so what would have to take place is my new study permits, my new visa, those ones that I had applied for again were now going to expire midway through this honors program. Guys, I think my parents didn't know what was happening. They were probably like, huh? And now I was in a situation where you cannot study if your study permit has expired. You have to extend it. The only way to extend that study permit, once again, is to prove that you have the financial capacity to support your tuition, to pay for your board, to pay for food and all your expenses for whatever duration of study you have left. So guess who had to provide another bank statement and get through that whole stress of trying to make sure that there's a bank statement with money in it to reapply for a new study permit, guys. I'm talking the third study permit at this point due to this decision. If I had left Zimbabwe with a clear perspective that I would go into the honors version of my program, I think it would have been much easier for my parents. What was also happening in Zimbabwe at this time is because of what happened in 2008. If you haven't heard or if you don't know, there was a global recession in 2008, but I'd say Zimbabwe is the country that took one of the hardest hits. Virtually, physically, of our money, our Zimbabwean dollar, became utterly useless. So it ended up just vanishing, and we started using the US dollar. So what was happening at this time was because we do not print the US dollar, it's not our money, there was this major, major foreign currency shortage. I'm talking nationwide, right? Just across the board. So what was happening is the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe was controlling the funneling of funds, specifically foreign currency, into the country and out of the country. So it didn't matter that your personal bank account had money in it. If you were applying to send foreign currency out of the country, pay school fees to Canada, for example, you had to apply for it and you would join a virtual queue at the Reserve Bank, which meant that the fees or the funds would be released as and when available to the Reserve Bank, not just because you had it in your account. So this was a very stressful situation because it meant your tuition could be late. It meant you could be a few weeks behind on school, and that actually happened to me 2 times. And of course, this is not everyone's situation. I am just speaking to what specifically was happening with me and sharing that just to help someone out there who might be trying to come to Canada, who might want to know hey, what are the things that can happen? This is my story. So I say all this to say, on top of the financial situation that was going on with my parents just navigating the financial situation back home and everything, paying my fees, the last thing that they needed was for them to have to provide another proof of fund statement. Tip with point number 2 is, if at all possible, have a very clear perspective, have a very clear picture of how long your program is, what do you need to have in order to successfully start and complete that program while you're here in Canada. If you're coming from a country that has some instability somewhat, I know it could be war for some countries, it could be the economy for some countries, your best bet for just a seamless transition and a seamless, study is to make sure you just do everything if you can one time when you come into the country the first time. So the third thing that I want to talk about is something that never crossed my mind, guys. When I was coming here and I was preparing to come to Canada for the first time, my head was in the clouds. I had been blessed with such an incredible opportunity to come abroad, to study abroad. For me, I was just thinking about going to Canada, going to study, and it never crossed my mind to think about what happens after you graduate. Why am I mentioning this? Development in even resources across certain countries is not distributed evenly. For example, Canada is a huge country. Much of the north is unexplored and people don't even live there, except in small little towns because it is extremely cold up there. Very few people live there. So the majority of the population of Canada is actually centered really close to the United States border. That being said, all provinces do not have the same number of opportunities. It just depends on what that province focuses on. For example, Alberta have so much oil over there. Very good if you're coming into the country to study engineering. Newfoundland and Labrador, for example, amazing place to be. If you're coming into the country to study ocean studies, oceanography, fisheries, anything to do with the ocean, because you can excavate, they have things set up because literally Newfoundland is right there by the ocean. Ontario, for example, pretty much they have everything going here in Ontario. Pharmaceutical industry is well developed here, more developed here than in other provinces in Canada. The thing that I didn't do was to do enough research about where am I going and what do things look like for me there. Obviously, the school that you go to is determined by so much more than just what it looks like after school. It could be affordability of the university, as it was in my case. It could be so many different factors. So obviously, those are the things that will come first. Can you afford the tuition at the school in the province that you want to go to? But it doesn't prevent you from doing the research, because when you do the research, you have more information about how do I maneuver myself, like during the duration of my program and after, to set myself up in the best way possible. What I experienced having finished a science-based degree program in Newfoundland was there wasn't enough industry and development to support what I had studied. And I found, as I talked to people while I was still in school, people who had finished the program, people that were doing the program, a lot of people had said, oh, we left. We just dropped it and started to do something else, started working in something else. And now, knowing what I know, it's really concerning, because ideally you want to obviously pursue your passion and you want to work in the field that you studied, right? But that was not my reality. And me and several other people who I know who studied science and were now struggling with this idea of like, who's going to hire me after I finish school? What are the job prospects for this particular thing? If at all you can control it, do some research and find out this thing that I want to study. There's certain things that, like, no matter where you are, you're always going to find a job. Business, finance, medicine is another thing. Law, there's certain things where it's like it doesn't matter where you are, and there's certain programs where it's actually where you are or where you study it is a huge contributing factor to, are you going to find a job in that area? Will you have to relocate from that area to another area to increase your chances of finding employment? I am very passionate about immigration because it's been a huge part of my life for the past 8 years. As I'm sitting here, I'm now a permanent resident of Canada, and I'm so extremely grateful for the journey. I've learned so many things, but now I feel it's my responsibility, because I've learned so much. I can help somebody who's trying to come to Canada, who has questions. So leave a comment down below, guys, if you have any questions for me about other things that I've learned being in the immigration system. I'm still in it, obviously, because I'm not yet a Canadian citizen, but I'm definitely much, much closer than I've ever been. I've seen it all. I've heard it all. There are definitely like do's and don'ts of things that you want to look out for if you're coming to Canada. And yeah, guys, that is what I wanted to sit down and talk to you guys about. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, if you want more information, leave a comment down below. Have an amazing day, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.